Welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic, the Sober Wise Guy series. In the SWG, I interview old timers. For those that don't know, that just means people that are in sobriety 30 years or more. They're clean and sober. I chose 30 years because I want to interview people that have been sober longer than me. And to some extent in recovery, I've noticed that old timers are sometimes marginalized. And the Incomplete Skeptic tries to unmarginalize marginalized voices. And it's kind of an odd thing with old timers. Some people assume that they don't need positive reinforcement, that they have big egos or something, and should be summarily dismissed as less than newcomers are in recovery. And it's my contention that we're all in a fellowship of equals. And it always really hits me in a good spot when I hear old timers admit to some of their shortcomings, like, oh, thank God you're just human like the rest of us, you know. And so newcomers are the lifeblood of the program, or the body, if you will. Old timers are kind of the backbone, though, and God is the spirit of our recovery and has quote unquote all power, according to the big book. Those that know what the big book is know what I'm talking about. The objective of SWG is to share experience, strength, and hope to the still suffering addict or alcoholic, and to inform the general public about what the recovered life looks like. My guest today is Craig O. Welcome to the Sober Wise Guy, my friend. Thank you for being a guest.
Thanks, Tim. I'm honored to be asked. It's a privilege to be able to share a little bit of my experience, strength, and hope.
Awesome. So what's your sober date?
December 6th, 1989.
1989. Geez, I bet you there's some people listening that weren't even born then.
Probably a few.
Yeah, probably, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully some millennials are watching and they'll get something out of this. And but what were you like before you sobered up?
At the very end, I was emotionally confused. I was spiritually bankrupt. Gets tossed around a lot, and for good reason. I was really lonely. I laughed really loud, but I was really lonely on the inside. I really like to try to surround myself with people to, in a failed attempt to combat that loneliness. It really didn't do a lot of good, but at least it was some background noise and the din of voices and music and whatnot, in an attempt to alleviate that loneliness. But I was pretty sad, and I was trying to hold it together as best I could, and it didn't work that great. I was unsuccessful. I guess that's kind of a good thing.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's been a lot of people who were unsuccessful in their drinking, as we like to call it sometimes, careers. And being unsuccessful while drinking or drugging, that seems to be a very common thing, but yet more of us stay drunk than get sober.
Right.
And it's kind of like it's like mystery in a way. What is it that allows us to see past ourselves to get to the point where we say enough's enough? I mean, or how did that look like in your life?
I think I was blessed with having a family member, my Uncle Paul, who had gotten in the program, and I spent a good amount of time around my uncle. My dad was he was mentally ill, and he was a practicing alcoholic and was not able to be a good dad. And so I spent a lot of time around my Uncle Paul, and he was in the program. And so I had this model, and I didn't even understand, I don't think, the attraction completely. In retrospect, I get it. I remember his humility being really attractive. And so I had a reference point. that there was something different, and that there may be a way to live other than what I was experiencing. I also had an interesting experience or event when I lived in Phoenix, Arizona. There was a couple of people at a party. I don't know what the heck they were doing there. It wasn't the greatest spot for them. They were in the program, but I look at it today as a loving God, just putting this out there. I had a different reference point, and they were talking about this, and I was intrigued. I don't know why it stuck necessarily. I wasn't in the frame of mind where I wasn't all that curious. I was a little curious, and that stayed with me. So when I kind of got to the end of the road, as we like to say, with the emotional confusion and the spiritual bankruptcy and failed attempts at pretty much everything, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, it was like, I knew that there may be a different way to live, because I had these two reference points, and they had talked about the program, the 12 steps. And I found myself to a meeting, and what happened there, intuitively, I know that the folks at that first meeting I went to were when they shared, they were talking about me, and it was profoundly impactful, so powerful. I knew intuitively, and now I know that's the empathy, the language of the heart, that these folks were not only talking about me, but I believed everything that they were sharing about themselves, that they were telling the truth, and that they had found peace and laughter. Certainly we're not a glum lot. They had that place rocking pretty good. And it was a relief. It's like, whoa, I could feel that I know this gets thrown around a lot. I felt like I was home, and that I was right where I needed to be. And this was my first meeting. And that there could be these folks had something that I was like, was very attractive. And that I wasn't just a screw up. There was something wrong with me. I had a disease, and that it felt really good to be there. I felt like I was right where I was supposed to be at that very first meeting. So that's kind of what happened, when I got there.
The one thing I'm hearing thematically, I believe, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but as I'm hearing it, is I'm hearing the word gratitudes being stated in probably 5 or 6 different ways, and it just keeps coming up. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And it's what I heard through my filter is that you had a number of spiritual experiences that were beginning to turn maybe into spiritual awareness. It's like, we have all these blessings that happen in our lives, but we don't quite understand them yet, especially that first meeting. It's like, wow, I'm so grateful. It's like, I found, I had the same feeling, right? That this was my family. For me, that was really important, because I didn't have a bio family, as some people might describe it. And, but that gratitude has a way of stripping off things that don't matter. But what allows us to be grateful when we have so many things going on in our life that just, I haven't had a job. I haven't been honest. Maybe sometimes we've served time. Maybe we're going through a divorce or whatever it is, what do you think maybe helped you elevate your consciousness to the point of some kind of spiritual awareness beyond the spiritual experience, to where all the stuff that was wrong or difficult suddenly seemed like it's surmountable?
I think you put it very, very well. I've never heard it put quite like that, but the gratitude, and there's some mystery there, and I can look and know that was a loving God working in my life. But this recovery journey, life itself is filled with mystery, and more will be revealed, and it has stacked up over time, where I have a greater understanding today, the cumulative of all my experiences and awarenesses they stack up to the present. And the gratitude, I love the way you put that, but gratitude does have the ability to kind of strip away what I know most of the time is extraneous. because the only thing that's really important is that I'm talking to you and I'm clean and sober today, and I have a relationship with a loving higher power. And everything else is really okay to be stripped away. I mean, certainly I have relationships and I got to keep the bills paid, quote unquote. But so there's a lot of mystery. I oftentimes over my time here have asked, why me? I don't quite understand. But what I do know that'll keep me in the present and grateful is to put some energy into getting in touch with that I'm alive, my life energy, my ability to live life on life's terms came from a power outside of myself. I was, and I'm really in touch with that. And that's the source of my gratitude. I get, there was a divine intervention that was profound and did for me what I could not do for myself. I tried, I had many attempts to try to clean up, go on a different path, regain control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like we all have. And they were all failed until I surrendered completely in the first step. None of it worked. That's just my story. And it was like pulling the arm on the slot machine. And they all came up 7 when I surrendered. It's really that simple. And that's the source of my gratitude, is that I'm alive, sane. I guess that might be arguable for some folks once in a while, but for the most part, yeah. And I continue to be restored.
So I was going to ask you if you can sum up the entire package of the program or recovery in 2 words. What would it be? But you kind of already illustrated the glue that holds recovery together as 1 word, really, and it's surrender.
Yeah.
So you beat me to the punch, sort of. But
Yeah.
what does it mean to surrender? Even though I kind of think you touched on it, but what does it mean to surrender?
I love the question, because surrender is the sweetest, most peaceful, beautiful feeling. What it means to me to surrender is to give myself to something. It's not, I don't really perceive surrender as much anymore as moving away from something, but surrendering to something. And that would be, I had it put to me years ago when I worked with my first sponsor, and I was so blessed. He put it to me this way, that it's never surrender that causes pain. It is always the resistance to surrender that causes pain. And it was like, I had to kind of think about that one. I was like, that is spot on. Surrender is always the same for me. It's if I don't fight, there is no fight. And that's really simple. That's really simple. And simple works for me. And when I don't fight and I surrender to the program, the steps, my higher power, a loving God, this process, my life is so peaceful and serene, and I experience abundance. And when I say abundance, I just mean a crazy amount of peace and serenity. And I'm unreasonably happy every day for the most part. And if I'm not, I know what I need to do to get back and strengthen my connection with God and to surrender. It's just sweet. It's no fight, the absence of fighting.
My favorite line in the big book is that, and it's in 2 different places, and I'm not a good big book thumper, so I remember information rather than page numbers. And I've even gone so far as to make some serious attempts at not memorizing things and not memorizing the steps, and because I didn't want to make it about me. It's about my connection to my higher power, and I just try to clear my mind of all that. Some people call it the set aside prayer, and then just trust it from there forward. But the line of the book says, and we quit fighting everything and everyone.
Yes.
And you know,
You-
and right. And in our society today, what I'm seeing is people that are fighting everyone and everything, and I recognize it because I used to do it. I used to be so part of that. And you know, how would you attract a person to you know, even believe the possibility of peace beyond comprehension?
I think I have to trust that anytime I have an opportunity to share my experience and how my relationship to God or how I found peace and serenity, that I have to trust that if I get the heck out of my own way and I just tell the truth about my experience, that whoever is to be touched by that or attracted to that will be, and that I'm not powerful enough to get past that. I don't that's where I would struggle. I've just witnessed the magic and the power of that, you know, the language of the heart, empathy, and just how powerful that is. So I believe that as we interact, and whether it's at a meeting or wherever it might be, I mean, you know, there's a lot of other possibilities for folks to chat and connect and get that heart to heart. It's all about just getting the heck out of the way and speaking the truth. And whoever is attracted by that, you know, I may have opportunities to share more of my experience or to take on a different role. But I kind of got to let that go too. I'm a very, I guess, I don't know if passive is the right word, but I'm a live and let liver to the extreme. I think that when I get in there and think I have more power than I really do have, I can cause more harm than good.
Amen.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of my take on it.
You'd I'm pretty sure you mentioned a word maybe a few minutes ago, the word sponsor. And what is that?
Well, my experience with having a sponsor, you know, it was when I came into the program, I started to look at some of these folks in the meetings. It was suggested that I find a sponsor. A sponsor is, I guess, the best way I've heard it put is a spiritual guide, somebody who can guide me through my experience with the 12 steps, really save me a little heartache, save me a little bit of frustration on, you know, unnecessarily, because we all start, you know, with no experience in this. And I know my first sponsor saved me. Of course, I felt so good about being clean and sober after a couple of weeks that I wanted to rush out and tell everybody how sorry I was and that things were different now. And he kind of corralled me and shared with me it might be a good idea to wait until the ninth step, which says that wherever possible, we make a direct amends to those folks we had harmed. And wherever is interesting in that it denotes it's God's time and not mine. Whenever is more about whenever Craig can get out there and try to relieve his guilt and unload on somebody. Wherever is thoughtful and it's patient, and it's more about God orchestrating an experience, you know, with humility as a building block, where you can have there's some miracles and a lot of healing that happen in that atmosphere. But a sponsor is to me, having a sponsor was really important, not just because he saved me from maybe some embarrassment and some heartache, but to have that relationship, to learn how to have a relationship, to be vulnerable with somebody and not run away was different. So there's a lot of things that can happen within that relationship, and all those relationships maybe have some real primary similarities, but they also might have some subtle differences too. Maybe you become friends, maybe you're not. But the most important thing in my experience is that they are a spiritual guide that you can trust, and that intuitively, and they will help guide you through the 12 steps. I'm a big believer in the 12 steps. I needed a profound personality change. I need the spiritual psychotherapy within the 12 steps. I had to become different because it was not just the fact that I used excessively and was all kinds of crazy. It was that I didn't know how to live at all. And I needed some help with that.
That's interesting. couple of things came to mind, and I've worked in a couple of treatment centers, so what I'm about to say might sound like I'm ragging on them, but I'm not. The treatment center suggests that, people don't make really important decisions when they first sober up, you know. But in the big book, it says that we have to change everything, so which is
Right,
it gonna be?
right,
So,
right.
but it's a, you talked about the word spiritual quite a few times, and there's a part of the big book that says we have a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. But you also mentioned higher power, God, intuition, and how do you balance out the maintenance of the spiritual condition with action and intuition? How do you balance that?
I think what's probably the building block for that balance would be a practice of the 11th step, which is we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for knowledge of God's direction for us and the power to carry that out. When I take that time early in the day before my head gets busy with, of course, the things that I need to do, and we all are busy and have stuff going on, but when I can get quiet, I can quiet my mind and allow intuition to come, which is just that still voice, soft voice of God. And I can have that be where I spring from, where I go from. That kind of takes care of that balance. I know, the answer to that prayer and meditation is my intuition. Now, it's God-given, it's precious. It is, oh, wow. Intuitively knowing how to handle things that used to baffle me. I guess there's a line in there. And to maintain it and to strengthen it, I have to honor it. It's like a muscle, if I ignore that still soft voice and go do what I'm going to do, or, gosh darn it, this is what I got in front of me and I'm going to do it, and my self-will gets involved, intuition will shrink and kind of retreat. But if I ask for it, I'm quiet so I can hear it, and then I act on it consistently, it's like a muscle, it gets stronger. And it really is such a gift. I'm so blessed that as a result, every little bit of my footwork in my attempt to have that peace and quiet and get that direction, every little bit of energy I put in is met 1,000-fold with calm, knowing what to do next. It's just in the flow, I like to call it, and it's really just contingent, like you shared. It's contingent on maintenance of my spiritual condition. This is a spiritual program. There's really no getting around it. I don't want to get around it. It's been the answer to my life. And daily I can stay clean and sober, and it means I got to put forth a little energy into maintaining this spiritual condition. And that's building block. That's foundational.
I think you're doing some of that now just by sharing your experience, strength, and hope, and passing it on. And I remember an earlier recovery where I wasn't getting medallions because I thought, it's not all about me. This is about the newcomer. And and I didn't, I think after my 5th year, I stopped getting medallions. And I was 10 years sober, and I was in a meeting called Outright Mental Defectives.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a fun meeting, and
Yep.
that was one of my few home groups I've had since sobriety. But after a pin night one night, a woman came up to me that was in long-term sobriety, and she said, "Timothy, how come you're not getting medallions?" Because she knew my sober date, and I told her it wasn't. People are going to see it as some ego exercise in egotism or something. And she said, did the knock V8 commercial on my forehead, idiot, it's not for you, it's for them.
Yeah.
It's to show them it can be done. And I was kind of deluded about that. But where I'm going with that is this intuitive attraction principle. And I've met so many people in earlier recovery who will say, well, I haven't been sober long enough to sponsor anyone. And they've made the same mistake that I was making. They're making it all about them. And if someone is attracted to what you have, maybe it's God, maybe it's their higher power that's like making that person want what you have. It's not about you having what they have, what they want. It's about their higher power getting themselves out of the way enough to see that what you have, that's the one that God is funneling them toward. I don't know. I'm not saying this very well, but it's like, oh yeah. So if they say, I want you as a sponsor and you don't think you're ready, well, who are you to say no? Because it's attraction, not promotion. And you don't control it, sort of a thing. So I'm going on a bit much here, but I'm hearing you say, one, you believe in prayer. Two, you have a daily regimen because of how you start your day out. Do you have, I mean, is that is your regimen like you sit in the morning that you say a prayer and you kind of set the stage? What do you do through the day to maintain your attitude of sobriety, and do you do something at night at the close of your day? I mean, everyone looks at these things differently maybe, but right. I'm just wondering how you do it.
I think that throughout my day, I start in the morning. I start in the morning by kind of going through the first 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. I say the serenity prayer in conjunction with the first step. I kind of get in touch with the I believe, we believe in the second step. And then I say the third step prayer. And I do that every morning. I sit and have some quiet time. Throughout the day, I've kind of looked at it like my whole day is a prayer, really. I'm talking to myself all day, and I say thank you a lot. Thank you to me is the simplest, most profound prayer that I can say. And thank you. And that's an ongoing thing because it's always pertinent and it's always real. Thank you. I'm having fun. I get to do what I love to do here. I'm clean. I'm sober. I get to laugh. I get to be of service. I mean, what a gift. Who'd have ever thought? And so, daily, ongoing throughout the day, I try to make people's lives better and not worse. I try to laugh as much as I can. And I try to say thank you a lot. And that really keeps me connected to kind of what we're talking about, maintaining the spiritual condition. I don't do a lot at night. I'm usually kind of relax, unwind a little bit, watch a funny TV show, and then I just I fade out. I will tell you that, I can be as well as I want to be, that if I took time at the end of my day and did certain things, I would probably feel better. There's no limit to the amount of what I can do to feel better. I think I'm only limited by what's between my ears. I'm a content, serene person for the most part. And I'm a big gratitude list guy. That there's something immensely powerful for me with putting pen to paper and listing the things that I'm grateful for. And I start with being alive and being clean and sober, having had a second shot at this. And then, of course, the magic with the gratitude prayer, the power is that once I take and pick up the pen and do it, then the list never stops. Mm-hmm. If I can't pick up the pen, then I'm probably a little stinky. And so it's perpetuating that. It's keeping that practice going. But a gratitude list for me is and I've done that formally and informally since I got in the program. And I talk about gratitude list a lot. I talk about it at home with my partner. I talk about it at work, being grateful. It tends to kind of be a part of my life talking about it, because it's really powerful. It can change the way I perceive things. It can strengthen how I perceive things. There's magic in there.
You must be tuning in or something, because you're coming up with words before I'm going to say them about it changing perception. And I don't hear that often, but I realized somewhere along the way, or at least looked at it this way, is that when I noticed when I put pen to paper, it changes the way I viewed the thing. Like there's a before and after. When I write it down and I just look at what I just wrote down, it's like something changes in me. And it's like, oh, I'll see something more about the thing that I only had in my head. And so it's like with when we write our personal inventory before facing all of our fears and, trying to find out what is stopping us from being a more viable, service-oriented person to God, to our fellows and ourselves and all that. When I started writing things down, I started viewing them differently. And in the A step, where we're writing down what we've done to others, after I write them down, I again started changing my perception about what I kept trapped in my head.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I started doing something about like my shortcomings out loud to God and to another human being, I had already told God and myself 100 times what a piece of garbage I was, but I had to expose all that pain to someone. Well, I didn't have to, I get to. You've said that over and over. I haven't heard you say I have to do anything. You get to do things, So, because it was such a blessing to me. But point is that when I said it out loud, it again changed the way I viewed it.
Yeah.
So there's something powerful about writing it down that is a change agent. Saying it out loud is a change agent. And it also reminded me of when I was going to college, I got, I was one of those guys that had a notebook, and I would take notes of what the professor was saying, and it would help me retain it and view it differently and take it more seriously. And then I would join a study group, and then we would talk about what we had heard out loud. And that same principle is true there. And you can really spread that out to therapy, to churches, to any kind of situation, I think. So this is a universal principle that I guess the founders of the program clued into,
Yeah.
So I'm hearing, when you're emotionally triggered, that you have some tools, but once in a while we get something comes up that just catches us off guard, and we're really like triggered and we want to blow up or say something stupid. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but there's times where I just want to go give someone the finger or something, and I don't do it, but I really want to. So it's like, how do you handle it when you're feeling that emotional trigger?
We certainly, there's no shortage of opportunities for spiritual growth. That's for sure. I've learned to pause. And that's because it causes less pain. And some of that is, if it hurts to hit yourself over the head with the hammer, just set the hammer down. So if I, if I do something, and I feel bad about it, I'm subjecting myself to some emotional pain. And so to kind of run that tape through to the end and go, I just don't like to experience those things. And that is not suggesting that I don't make mistakes, get into my defects of character, none of that stuff. I am crazy human. But I do it far less than I did when I got here. And I do it less every day. And that is, I try to operate, the 12-step talks about, we practice these principles in all our affairs. And when I do that, I don't have regrets. I don't have to stew on woulda, shoulda, coulda. I just did the next right thing. There's a feeling that comes from that, and it's peace and serenity. And I don't have to think about what I did and, oh gosh darn it, I wish I wouldn't have done that, and this kind of thing. It takes some. Well, another thing that the ability for me to do that is letting my higher power, God, help me consistently. That's key. I think my spiritual condition kind of shows itself in how I treat other people. And how I walk through situations that you're talking about. I mean, because, I get frustrated, I get pissed off, I have all this stuff going on. It's what I do with that. Can I stop? Can I think about the consequences of acting out in that kind of behavior, some old behaviors, some just, maladaptive ways of thinking and living? Or can I take some time, take a few deep breaths, think about the outcome of practicing the applicable spiritual principle, and then the result is much different. But I can play that out without having to get into that stuff that you're talking about. And I get those opportunities, like all of us, consistently.
Right on. Okay, this is like a comedian question. Are you perfect?
Oh, absolutely not. Oh boy, I'm perfectly imperfect. How about that? Or imperfectly perfect, however you want to look at it.
You remember that book, The Spirituality of Imperfection?
No.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. And when you were mentioning just say thank you as being one of the most powerful prayers, I actually have the book titled Just Say Thank You. And I was looking for it. As soon as you said that, I started looking on my bookshelf. It's like, oh, okay, I think we're considering relocating. So I put it in storage. Darn, because I was going to hold it up in front of the camera.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Right. So, okay, here's I know there's a chapter to the agnostic, and to me, it's the most spiritual part of the big book. That's
I love it.
Opinion,
I absolutely love it.
So
just
so many cool things.
Love it.
But here's where I think some people get caught up a bit, and people that know the history of the 12-step program, they might know that there was an atheist that got sober, and he was the one, after much haggling with people, got it put in the third step, as I perceive this. I'm no expert on the history, but he got it put in the third step as we understood him. And which leads me to my original question: can an atheist or an agnostic get sober? What have you seen in that way?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think that is I don't think that necessarily needs to be any kind of obstacle. I think that we are all subject to the clutter that goes on between our ears, and the the disease is looking very keenly at ways to keep us from qualifying for this way of life. And oftentimes, and we are a rebellious lot. I think that we agnostics is masterful. It is, you can't, for everything that you do, all the yeah buts you throw at it, it does an amazing job. I think one of the things that breaks down or eases the discomfort or the clutter for some folks who are really uncomfortable with the God word is the feeling they get when they sit in those rooms. If there's anything that can erode that to the degree where somebody can use the power, it's the power of empathy. Because you don't have to put a name on any of this for it to work necessarily. And language is cumbersome and often divisive. Stick with the feeling. How did that when you sat in that meeting and somebody started talking about you and they were going through something immensely powerful and you started to shed a tear, what was that? That's what's important. I think that will help folks. And people want to disqualify. I think that and it's unfortunate. And I try to be sensitive or thoughtful about not offering up somebody a reason to leave. But we agnostics does it a heck of a lot better than I ever could. I know it's interesting. I don't. I've seen a lot of people get clean and sober and stay and have that profound personality change and not necessarily have their spirituality be about the God word. Is that coming
Yeah.
close to what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it helped me understand it even better, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's more than what I had asked for. So that was a takeaway for me. What do you think? I think you touched on this just a little bit in your prior answer. But what do you think makes some people relapse?
Well, if I think letting their guard down and stopping in terms of maintenance of a spiritual condition. I mean, and I can speak to that. You know, when I had, so I'll tell you just a little bit about I went to my first meeting when I was 19, and I got a sponsor. I worked through the 5th step. I shared my 5th step. I come out of there on the old pink cloud of zeal. And I even spoke at a treatment center. I spoke at Project Turnabout in Granite Falls on a Sunday night, family night. Shortly
I spoke for them
after,
too.
yes, shortly after, you know, I gave my 5th step. So I was flying.
Mhm.
And after I spoke there, I didn't do another thing. I didn't call my sponsor. I didn't go to meetings. And of course, I relapsed. So I stopped. I didn't, and not only did I stop, but talk about a really, really bad time to stop. So you've shared a 5th step. So now you are acutely aware of how sick you are. And you didn't go on to where the rubber meets the road, which is and start to engage in the process where you become a different person. So I just kind of left myself with that, you know, I felt good to get it out like you had shared about earlier, but I didn't do anything with it. I didn't do anything about it. I mean, in the 6th and the 7th step, the 8th and the 9th, that's where this change, that lasts for a lifetime when maintained happens. And that's why I relapsed. And you know what, if you get anybody who Big Book talks about resentments being the number one offender.
That's
Anybody
what
who,
I was going to ask you about next.
yeah, anybody, and I would say, and I get totally what they are saying in the Big Book is that I will, and through my time in recovery, I can get resentful. And I used to think that I could take a particular resentment, maybe a real juicy one where I could get go all over with my self-righteous indignation and kind of feed on it for lack of a better phrase, quote unquote, but I could compartmentalize and that I could just do that, could dabble a little bit. And I know you got to be a drunk or an addict to get, I could enjoy it. Only a drunk or an addict would get enjoying a resentment, right? Because that's not really, I know normal is setting on a dryer, but yeah, exactly. It's so, you know, and I know you get that. But what I found out is though, I had about as much power over compartmentalizing a resentment as I did over after I took the first drink or the first drug, which is 0. Pretty soon that resentment had bled its way into every area of my life, and it was all encompassing. And I'll tell you what, we resent like there's a prize, and it's an Olympic sport. And anybody who gets that stinky between the ears and resentful, a drink will absolutely start to look pretty good, or a drug, or anything to take you out of that kind of bitterness and that kind of nastiness. So when the Big Book talks about cutting off resentments, cutting off the sunlight of the spirit, boy, do I get in touch with that. And then the flip side is to live in the absence of those resentments and to be in that sunlight. I'm very intolerant of partaking of resentment for me, because I don't have time to get that stinky. It's just so ugly. And the opposite of being in harmony with a loving higher power, loving God. They're ugly, and they are the opposite of all that's good. And for me, you know.
Yeah, that step 6 thing is, you know, the rubber hitting the road, as you said. The 6th step, for those that might not know, is where we are entirely willing to let God remove all these defects of character, which is what we illustrated in step 5. We got honest and out loud about it. And I remember praying for years for God in the 7th step to remove my shortcomings. And it just seemed like it was so incrementally happening that my defects were being abbreviated or weakened. And I couldn't understand that. And, you know, the sixth step, after the fifth, I was walking down the sidewalk and I felt higher than I had felt prior to that time in my entire life. And it took me a long time to do the fifth step, by the way. I had no trust in people, and I finally surrendered and asked God if I'm supposed to do a fifth step, who should I do it with? And God showed me, so I did it. And then I hit that really beautiful place where I felt like I was in heaven and earth at the same time. But then as I'm trying to improve myself by asking God to remove the shortcomings that are still there, and I was getting frustrated. I felt like, why aren't these prayers being answered? What's going on? And then one fine day, I heard a prayer that I'd heard hundreds of times, but I finally, got the spiritual awareness. The prayer itself was a spiritual experience or the spiritual material, but the awareness made it an experience. And but we asked that our shortcomings or our defects of character or our sins or whatever you want to call them be removed, our that character be changed. 100 ways to say this, so we can be of maximum service to God, to ourselves, and to our fellow human beings, and all that. It's like, I'm trying to be a better person, and that's why I was asking, and that's not why. It changes because we're trying if they're not being removed, because I'm asking for me to be a better person, than what's left. Well, maybe they need to be removed so I can help someone else. So to be a witness of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. It's not about me. I'm an instrument. And then when that happens, and I finally realized it, doors started opening like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
And stuff started being taken away, and I've still got plenty of defects, but now I realize that they're there to, if they're still there after I've asked God to remove them, then they are a tool in the hand of God to make life better for someone else. And that seems ironic, but or even paradoxical, but that's how I look at it. I just trust that it's there, if for no other reason, to keep me humble enough to not put myself or other people on pedestals. There I went on a little bit. Okay.
No, it's good stuff.
So but I'm gonna change the topic to one of our slogans, and I call it a slogan. Some people might say it differently, but HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You've already talked about angry. You haven't talked about hungry, and I rarely hear people talk about the H in HALT. What's your take on that? Is it nutrition? Is it, are you eating good or often enough? What is it?
Well, it's probably not what I've been doing lately. I probably should feel hungry more. I get in touch with hangry. I know when I'm running on fumes. It's funny, Marie and I will be in our travels. We like to, wherever we're doing, we use the word hangry quite a bit, because that is, my spiritual condition can change based on getting overly hungry. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is where it pertains to the HALT is, the HALT can affect my spiritual condition pretty dramatically. And when I get no sleep, I'm pretty empty in terms of my spiritual condition. I have to get decent sleep. Lonely, sometimes I need a little bit of downtime, with myself. I get plenty of that. So I'm kind of a people person, and I'm with people around my work a lot. So that's not really an issue as much. The anger, and I did talk a little bit about resentment. Anger is one that I was brought up and it was modeled for me how to control people with rage. So it was a pretty powerful defect that I had to work this process with. So that's kind of off the table for me. That's not the hunger, for me, when I'm working, I eat every 2-3 hours, small stuff, just enough to kind of fuel me up and keep me going. And that seems to work pretty good. I know intuitively when I'm getting a little out of balance and I'm getting a little hangry, and it's got to be addressed, but it definitely impacts my spiritual condition. All of the halt does. And that self-care piece, I'm not sure that maybe we are remiss in not talking about a little more sometimes with folks who are a little newer to the program. I know it's something I continue to work on and try to improve on, especially the nutrition piece. I do good during the day, and then in the evenings I fall a little bit short. It's become a kind of a deep rut to have something that I'm eating when I'm watching a little TV in the evening, and it's not a good time. So,
ironic. I was thinking of this last night. I did an hour of sweating and praying last night, and then after cooling down and getting cleaned up, I grabbed some chips and started eating garbage food. So, but it tastes so good.
yeah.
But it is kind of ironic, but worse things have happened. I mean, I think by and large I'm doing okay there, but there's one piece, the L in halt, the lonely, and I think a lot of people before they sober up suffer from this, and then people that haven't done the fifth step, until a person actually lets someone into the most lonely part of their entire life, the part they don't want to show anybody, they'll just hold on to that despondent, lonely sort of I should be isolated. This part of me should be isolated. It proves how bad I am and all that stuff. I'm not Catholic, but I my old sponsor, she's rest in peace. He used to talk about loneliness being endemic in recovery, and she was a Catholic, and best I can tell, no one does forgiveness like a Catholic. And she was really good for me. She forgave the person who drove drunk and killed her son, but recovery people are pretty good about forgiveness as well, and Buddhists are good at it, but in my experience, no one does it like a Catholic. And the woman whose child I killed driving under the influence is Catholic as well. And eventually she got to the point in her life where she said she loves me and she forgives me. So, they latched on to something really big there. But I remember a story by Mother Teresa. She was in, I think it was Seattle, and the Catholics were going to open a homeless shelter. And she was there to promote it, the grand opening, and was hoping people would, maybe donate money to have more resources for them or something. This is a long time ago, but there was 2 radio talk show hosts that were quite well known, and I don't remember their names. I just heard the recording. But they had asked her a question at the end of the interview. They said, well, Mother Teresa, you've spent your life helping other people. What can we do for you to make your life better? What can we do for you? She said, well, what you can do for me is find somebody that feels lonely, that feels all alone, and persuade them they're not. And that's what my old sponsor did for me with the fifth step. Is she told me something that she had done that she said, I've only told 2 or 3 people this in my life. And then she proceeded to tell me, because she knew she was hearing a real fifth step with me, because I told her some things that she wasn't very happy with. but yet she, it allowed her to open up, and she saw the true value of healing when she told me that, because it taught me that I'm not alone. It taught me that I'm just a human being. And I think so many of us isolate because of what we've done to ourselves or other people, or has been done to us because we're so ashamed of it, whatever it is, the resentments, and we isolate, and that can kill us, you know?
Yes.
So, you know, to be the person that's there in the fifth step without judgment is so powerful, you know?
Yeah.
Have you heard anyone's fifth steps?
Yeah. I had a couple of sponsees who shared their fifth steps with me, and it's well, I did some preparation spiritually for those to get to that place where it was just all about non-judgment and being trustworthy, and remembering that I too had shared a fifth step, and the importance. That's an important time. It's an important part of the process. And you're right, it does one of the benefits, or one of the byproducts of sharing a fifth step, is there is a lessening of that uniqueness, that things. I mean, I think we can only get through our loneliness to the degree that we feel less lonely on the inside. I don't think it has very little to do with being around other people, or I think it's a state. It's and yeah, you're right, it has a lot to do with shame. It has a lot to do with guilt. It's a little bit of a prison that those things create for us, and we're internal. And as we share fifth steps, listen to fifth steps, listen to people in meetings, it starts to, we lose a lot of that terminal uniqueness, and a lot of our shame and our guilt, and through the process, and we become a lot less lonely. I think we can be alone and be really comfortable, and not be lonely much at all. Yeah, no, that was a good perspective. I think it's so true.
Yeah.
So true.
You know, this guilt thing that comes up in us, you know, with my public speaking for DWI audiences, I try to change the mindset, because I think there's so many people that do victim impact panels or impact panels to talk to DW offenders, and they'll try to make them feel bad enough so they'll never do it again. And I don't like that. They don't understand that doesn't help an alcoholic. If somebody has an alcohol problem, you think that you're subjecting them to an extreme sense of guilt is somehow going to make them feel guiltier than they've already punished themselves with, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not a guilt-shaped hole in people's lives that if we just stuff enough pain in there, they'll stop doing the things that are making them addicted to misery, you know? So we're feeding the monster when we do that. And why people can't maybe see that, I don't know. I mean, I think their intentions are well. I don't think they're trying to make people sick. They're trying to make the world a better place. But, you know, if you had the power to change the paradigm, like Ernie Larson, you remember, do you know about him at all? He used to say all the time, pain becomes power when you hold it up to grace. If you had a minute at the podium to say something that would just persuade people to flip the script in their lives, how would you reduce it? Or what would you say?
I'd say that we can accept the amount of love that we feel like we deserve, and that when we can get, I would suggest strongly exploring a relationship with a power greater than yourself, whether you call that God or not. I think it's been the building block for my life, and I try to give that away to the best of my ability, because I know what that means, and I would, yeah, I'd try to have to get out of the way, because I want it really bad, and I'm just not that powerful. It happens in the course of my everyday life. I get those opportunities, but I don't know what I would say. Surrender.
Okay. Well, okay. Let me ask it a different way then. What would you put on? You know, you might change your mind, and maybe you've already thought about it, maybe you never will. But what would you put on your tombstone?
What would I put on my tombstone? The benefactor of an insane amount of grace.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, got a second shot. Had a divine intervention. Grateful,
Nice.
blessed beyond measure.
Yeah, man. The I've had a lot of pain in my life before I sobered up, but the pain didn't make me sober up in and of itself. And it's really ironic because it's like we're so able to endure a phenomenal amount of pain. And
Yeah.
sure, the day might come where we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but we were sick and tired before. And for years, I was fighting everyone and everything and doing time, and I was pretty emotionally bankrupt, to coin the phrase you used earlier. And but it's really interesting that all the pain rolled up into one experience before I sobered up actually didn't even compare to the pain that I experienced while in recovery that I did not drink over. And it was a relationship that I had with someone that I loved desperately, who relapsed, and she went through hell, and she, eventually drank herself to death. But I had to leave the relationship, and that was the hardest period of my life. And there was so much pain in that. And I call it, the dark night of the soul. And God used that 3.5-year period to just burn off all the parts of me that didn't belong. And, talk about a willingness to let God remove my shortcomings. That hurt to have those things burned off of me. I wouldn't trade it in for anything. But where I'm going with this, I think, is, what hard lesson what hard lesson have you gone through in sobriety that while you were going through them, you might have become, oh, F this, this is really painful, whether it's divorce or anything, I don't know. But what hard lesson are you today grateful that you went through?
I think one of the more difficult was I was faced with the decision to remain in a relationship or not. And I thought that the reason I couldn't do it or wouldn't do it is because I was scared to do it. And so I went to therapy, and I did some serious self-discovery, and I got to the point where I decided that I was not going to remain in that relationship. And there was an immense amount of guilt involved, and I actually wanted to check out. I was not. I thought that not having to deal with any of this was a viable option, which was committing suicide, and it was really, really painful. A little bit like what you described. It's an interesting coincidence, if you believe in such a thing. But and I remember talking to my sponsor and saying, and in retrospect, it makes me kind of laugh. I was whining, I guess you could say, but I was in pain. And I asked him, I said, why did I have to learn this lesson this way? And when I heard you talk about this 3.5-year period, burning off the pieces of you that were not helpful, they were character defects, they were just not who you were becoming, it made me think of this. So I asked him, I said, why did I have to learn this way? And his answer just rings and stays with me. It said, do you think you would have learned it any other way? No. And that's the wisdom of my higher power. And there's a lot of trust involved now with that. You talked a lot about the 7th step. When I surrender in the 7th step, I'm going to get opportunities to do things differently. There is no arbitrary removal, as you know. And anytime I engage in, I want to change this or remove it, I'll just make it worse. But the good news is it's rigged in our favor, because when I make it worse, I get
Mhm.
more pain, I surrender, and that's the key anyway. So I can keep going in that, and ultimately it will end up in the same place, which is I'll cause myself pain by trying to control it, and it's not of me in the first place. And
Mhm.
so I'll get closer to the surrender. The answer to the seventh step in humbly asking is that I will get, it gives me chills thinking about the experiences I had after working the seventh step. I would get these opportunities in front of me, and it would be so clear that there was a different way to do it, and I'd do it, and then hence it would make that real for me forever, in that I now know how to live differently. But I had to do it myself so that I could internalize it and make that how I live now. It couldn't be arbitrarily plucked, because it wouldn't have meant a damn thing anyway.
Mhm.
What has anything that's been arbitrarily plucked from my life or been easy meant to me anyway? Not a lot.
Mhm.
Typically, I had to have the most significant one sting a little bit.
Mhm.
They stuck.
Right on. You might actually get a laugh out of this, but if someone asked me what my superpower is, I'd probably say not committing suicide. You know?
Yeah,
And
it
that's
shouldn't be that funny, but it is.
no, it is. It's ironic. Is because that's the third step for me. Is the only reason I didn't kill myself during that 3.5 year period. And I asked God just over and over, please kill me, please kill me. I don't want to be here anymore. And but I had already turned my will and my life over to the care of God, so I couldn't kill myself because it wasn't my life to take. And I thought, well, this is really inconvenient. Thanks a lot. And but I kept having miracles happen, and I kept thinking it was going to be a breakthrough and this is going to all end, but I was actually going deeper into the problem, or not the problem. I was going deeper into where I needed to go to kill the part of myself that didn't want to live anymore. And
Yeah.
it's a paradox. It's just like we have to when we talk about surrender, we're talking about really surrender. And
Yeah.
and I think, I didn't think of this until you were talking. But if I put it on my tombstone, it might be, well, I got it all figured out.
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah.
all the answers, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of wrapping up here time wise. And is there any parting kind of pearl pearl of wisdom, pearl of great price that you would like to leave our listeners with before I close up the show here?
What came to me just in that instant when you said that was that you talked at the beginning about folks who have put together a few days, and there's a perspective, with those people, and there's people walking in the doors for the first time, is that um, everybody in that is important. And I know you will often hear the newcomers are the most important person. They truly are a fire. But I think you were right. I think that we should maybe look at valuing unconditionally the participation of people who put the energy into walking into the room. They got up, they came in, they sat down, and they're there for a reason. And we don't necessarily have to judge so much they're all important. They're all important. I sit and I listen to somebody who's putting together a few days or whatever, and I hear the most profound things that maybe I have forgotten or taken for granted, and it brings tears to my eyes. And then I can listen to the guy next to me over here he might have a few more days than I do, and he'll just drop some simplicity on me. That's like, wow, this thing just gets better and better all the time. They're both beautiful. Some people learn to play music by studying sheet music, and some people play it by ear. The music is equally beautiful. It just comes from different places sometimes,
Ooh, well
So
put. I love that. I can't
yeah,
improve on that. I'd like to say something wise on top of it, but creating the sober wise guy wasn't about my being wise. I actually thought of it as the Three Stooges sober wise guy.
Yeah.
That's actually where it came from. And somebody
Yeah.
said, nah, just play it straight. I said, all right, fine, whatever.
Yeah. I think it's a good name.
Yes, sir. Hey, you know what? I so appreciate you being on the Incomplete Skeptic Sober Wise Guy series. I see God working in mysterious ways, and life is a mystery. It's a beautiful mystery. Thank you for being a guest.
Yeah.
And
thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor and a privilege.
All right. Likewise, bro. And a wrap her up. Thanks, guys, for coming to the Incomplete Skeptic Sober Wise Guy. Rock and roll. Live long and prosper.